Okay guys, here's where we're at. Got a radio here. This is a Cobra 146. Cobra 146, first of all, this is an old radio. This goes back to maybe, well, to be honest with you, I think this radio had come into my store when I had it years ago, back in like the mid-80s. Now, when some of these radios came into my store, if the customer didn't want to wait for it, and most of the times I always wanted the customer to wait if they had a half an hour. It doesn't normally take much more than a half an hour to fix a radio, especially a CB radio. I mean, it could get really tough at times, you know, some of the sideband and stuff, but as a rule it doesn't take a half an hour to fix a radio. Now it may take longer because I haven't got all the equipment, but at that point, as a rule, it doesn't take it. So I would always have to, listen, you had a half hour, you want to hang around? And it's not like I was getting, you know, 40 radios a day. So at that point, it wasn't where I had a whole lot of buildup. Some of the commercial stuff was a different story. But then I would just give them a loaner and let them be on their way. And then when their radio was done, I call up the company, say, come and pick up your radio, and it's done. But when it comes to CB, a lot of my traffic was truck drivers, and with truck drivers, they need their radio, so they don't mind hanging around for half an hour. Gives them a break, gives them something. I always had a lounge for them to sit down, have their coffee, whatever they want to do. So it wasn't a big deal. But when somebody came in with a entry level, like for instance this 146 was Cobra's entry level sideband, AM sideband. It wasn't an expensive radio, it's just one of their radios, and they don't want to wait for it. I would say, well, you're going to have to leave a deposit. Now, I wouldn't charge much, $10, just enough to say, okay, you're coming back, because I don't want to put time into it to find out what's wrong with it, and then have you never come back, and me be stuck with no time, no pay for the time. So give me a $10 bill, and once you sign off on the repair, if you were to sign off on the repair, the $10 goes towards the cost of the repair. It's not a big deal. Yeah. And most of the time your repairs were somewhere between 20, 25 bucks to maybe 40, 45. They weren't a lot as a rule. That would be an average, so to speak, back then. But again, they're not going to wait for it. And then sometimes they would come back and you tell them what's wrong with it, and they'll say, well, never mind. They want to take the radio, and then they want to try to figure it out themselves and fix it themselves because you just told them what was wrong with it. And then they come back swearing at you because they couldn't fix the radio. Oh, hello. Yeah. But meanwhile, at least you got $10 out of them. Well, this radio, I can assume that was one of those radios. Now, because it was so long ago, I haven't got the ticket on it, so I couldn't tell you what's wrong with the radio. I really don't know. But apparently they never came back. Now, when I got rid of the store, you know, there was a few things that were there. And also on the receipt, it also said, if you don't call us, make contact, or get a hold of us, or pick up the radio within 90 days, you lose it. That's all there is to it. Because the other thing is, if I fix a radio for you, I've got time and parts and money into this thing. After 90 days, I'm selling it. Now, if I profit on it, fine. But I'm at least going to get my money back out of it. And that's where I would work. So hold on a minute, I got to change the battery. Alright, so the battery's changed. So meanwhile, that's how I'm thinking I got the radio. Because when I did get rid of the store, there was a few things I said, you know, I'm just going to take some of this stuff that I have time and money into. Which I had done. I took in some parts with me, and they knew this, so I wasn't like I was taking anything that didn't belong to me. So I think that's probably how I ended up with it. So meanwhile, I said, you know what, this has been kicking around. I move it here, I move it there, never opened it, still have no idea what's wrong with it. And I know it's tired, so I opened it up the other day, and I started to do a video on it. I said, well, wait a minute. This is going to take forever, so let me, not so much forever, but this could be a little bit of entertainment. So I decided to do this with it. Now I did key it up, and I found out that it's tired. It is tired. It may not even key up right now. No, see? It's tired. And I do have it on CB mode. And the mic is good. Remember I told you, if you ever have a radio and you key the mic and nothing happens, first thing you want to check is the mic. Well, I know the mic is good on this one, so we have no problem there. But again, as you can see, it's not keying up, nor am I hearing anything. Squelch is off, RF gain is up, and we're on AM. And let's just put it on channel 26. Just to have it on 26 for no other reason. Let me put this piece of wood over here so I don't have to worry about this thing shorting out. There. You guys see that meter? Probably not. Well, you can if the light doesn't reflect in it. Alright, but meanwhile, I'm thinking at this point that we have a cold solder joint somewhere on the board. Now, as soon as I looked it up, opened it up, and looked at it, I kind of see that there's a lot of touch-up on this board that was done by what we would call a butcher. The golden screwdriver. The guy that thinks he's going to fix it and knows everything and only makes things worse. Alright, the guy that could have the ability, if he wanted to educate himself a little bit, but doesn't understand and he thinks he knows it all, and that's what happens. By me looking in here, I can tell there's a lot of stuff in this radio that is wrong as far as just the way that they soldered it. Now, because of the solder joints that I'm seeing all over the place, I'm going to take the assumption that there's some cold solder joints in here and somebody tried to find them. So they just started soldering, not realizing what the hell they were soldering, and they soldered things up to where it looks like goiters. I mean, they look like giant zits that got to be popped. You know, they just put so much solder on these things. You know, they just look like shit. Well, for instance, I don't know if you can see this or not right here. Right. But there's a difference. If you look at those, I shouldn't be going in here with a metal screwdriver, but I haven't even got my tuning tools anymore. If you look at these solder joints, you can tell that those aren't factory solder joints. These are factory solder joints. And when I say factory, the factory doesn't sit there and hand solder, you know, one person sit here and hand solder everything. They have a pool of solder that has a little ripple in it. And the boards skim across the pool, and the ripples come up, the board's already fluxed, and what it does is just solders everything. And the solder sticks to the flux and solders, and that's basically how it works. That's a simple way of putting it. And that's why most of the solder joints are all going to look like this. Now, once in a while, over time, or over, you know, the temperature changes and stuff like that, sometimes the solder joints, if there's one that's a little on the shiny side, it's not quite a good solder joint, you know, because of the machine or whatever, sometimes they'll become kind of like a cold solder joint, so to speak. Or they may, because of the board freezing and expanding and the, you know, extracting and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, next thing you know, the little part is no longer part of the board, and the solder kind of just breaks away. So you can tell that these are all resoldered. Now, when they resoldered these things, with the amount of solder, instead of cleaning out the old solder, which you really don't have to do every time, but that would be one of the right ways of doing it. Am I going to do it now? Probably not. I may do a few if I see too much solder on something. But when they start putting too much solder in, there's always a possibility that that solder is going to bleed over to another connector or another solder joint, and now you just fused or soldered two pieces together that shouldn't be. See? And that's what happens a lot. Now I'm thinking, again, it's a cold solder joint. I got a regular toothbrush here, by the way. It's nothing fancy, just an old toothbrush. And I'm just kind of like just brushing over it real quick. Now, I'm going to turn this up a little bit, because I know this mic is good. I've tested it on other radios. So I'm going to kind of just, see? When I push down on that, I'm getting receive. So if I push down on that, you may or may not see the meter from here, but let's try it. No, you're not going to see the meter. Let's bring this up a little bit so you can see partial the meter. When I push down on that board, I'm going to key the mic as well. See? Now we have carrier. Okay, so this is telling me that we have a cold solder joint. Now I can try to narrow it down, sometimes just with the brush, by going like this. Again, it's not a metal brush. It will kind of sometimes, if the joint's bad enough, it'll tell me, because I'll hear it. All right. Well, the joint apparently isn't all that bad. I mean, it's worse. It's not that bad. I mean, it's back. It's not working, but it's not something that's just there that the brush can find for me by a little bit of movement. But it seems, no matter where I push on the board, I'm having that issue. Don't want to push that down too much. So this is telling me that we've got some solder joints here, or over soldered, and they're almost touching one another when they shouldn't be. So somebody was in this radio that was trying to find something and didn't find it. So that's part of where we're at. So I'm not going to bore you with all that. I'm just going to go through this real quick, turn the camera off, and I'm going to start touching up a lot of these solder joints until I find the one I think it is. And then I'll turn it back on and give you an idea where the hell I was. So meanwhile, let me get some solder over here. Oh God, the solder flux is getting to be a pain in the ass to open. I got some solder wick. Solder wick is something that you can use to take the solder off the board. And sometimes if the solder is old, or it's just not working, or the wick is old, sometimes just by taking a little flux on your fingers and just doing this with it, almost wiping it back off, it'll help suck the solder out. Or sometimes putting some fresh solder on it, it'll help suck the solder out. However, whenever you're doing this, you want to make sure that the voltage is disconnected from the radio. Not just turned off, but disconnected. Because even though it's off, there's still voltage going from the power plug to the switch. And you don't want to worry or have to concern yourself or worry about that shorting out while you're screwing around. So disconnect the power. Alright, so I'm going to shut you guys off for a minute. I'm going to go through some of these, clean it up a little bit, and I'll be back. Alright, now, I'm still on this, and I'm finding a couple of problems. I've got the cold solder joint fixed. However, it seems that I have a small bank of channels not working. So, there could be voltage on the PL not getting to where it's supposed to be getting to. Could be the crystal, reference crystal, could be a number of things, but we're going to go back and forth here to see. But meanwhile, I did find a resistor that is not soldered, and it should be. Now I'm looking at it on this side of the board, and on this side of the board it would be right here, and this one right here. Now when I was checking for cold solder joints, I noticed that that resistor was not even through the board. It was down like that, and the solder wasn't even touching it. Now, not knowing exactly what it was, it could have been a resistor, it could be a capacitor. You flip the board back and forth and you try to find out where it is. Well, sometimes it's a little tough. So what you do is you take a flashlight and you put it where you think your problem is on the board, and you turn it over, and then when you look, let me find it again, right there. There. Okay, now I can look and I can say, ah, there it is. It's that resistor right there. That resistor wasn't through the hole. And if it wasn't through the hole, it wasn't making good contact. And that's another little hint when you're trying to locate something on both sides of the board. Alright, so So now that we found that, let me put some solder on it so it doesn't fall through again. I mean, I know where it is now, but still. And the one right next to it is another resistor, which is connected. Alright, so that takes care of those two. Now we still have a little bit of an issue here, because I don't think that was the issue. No, see? We have no receive, and we're on channel 23. So we lose it 27 to 22. 22 to 27 is dead. Alright, now we got, hold on, 32 to 37 is dead. See, we got something going here. 22 to 27, 32 to 37. Let's go back up to another 7 here. 2 through 7, dead. 12, yeah, through 17, dead. So you see where we're going here? Now that could very well be a back crystal. What I'm going to do though is check real quick to see what we have here. Or it could be a leg on the PLL. This is the PLL chip over here, your phase lock loop. Just right here. That's the chip in most radios that you can do a little conversion or do a little jumping here and there and a little cutting here and there on the traces, and you can get that to take you to other channels. However, with this particular one, that chip isn't capable of doing that. No, that chip is not capable of doing that. But if somebody didn't know, they may have been screwing around with the chip. Now, I haven't got any freezer spray, so I can't shock a crystal. These are 2 crystals. I don't have a schematic on this, so I don't know for sure. But for instance, if you wanted to shock a crystal, you would heat it up with a solder iron and then freeze it with freezer spray immediately after you heat it up, and that kind of shocks the crystal. Or sometimes if you start to heat it up, it'll start to come back, and then, you know, again, you freezer spray it. Now, is it a way of fixing it? No, but sometimes it's a way, sometimes it will, but sometimes it's a way of also checking to see if you have a back crystal. Again, I haven't got any freezer spray up here. What the hell did I use it on? I used to have a can up there. Oh, anyway, I must have used it on something. Now, it could be that somebody screwed around with one of the cans, but it doesn't seem to be that way. It really doesn't. So I'm going to flip the board over here and play with these crystals for a minute. Now, I can't strip a crystal out of the old radio that I took apart, the old tram, because they're 2 different radios. This is a sideband unit. That's a 23. This is a 40. There's a lot of differences, so they couldn't just strip out a crystal to try it. And again, I'm not sure if that's the case or not. So that's where we're at so far, and I will be back. All right. Channel 17, 16, 37, 36. Remember, 32 to 37 were bad. 32, 33, 34. 27 to 22 is bad. All right, we're in. We're there. And we got it fixed. Now, I must say, it took me a little bit longer than usual. Only because I really haven't got the equipment here, and I haven't got the eyesight that I used to have. Magnifying glass helps a lot. And then sometimes, you know, you just lose it, you know, after a while. You say, you know, you just forget things, you know, and it comes back to you as you go along. So meanwhile, let me get this camera situated a little bit. Turn this off for a minute. Alright. So we're on frequency, as you can see. If I shut up a minute. Okay. Let's go to 32. That should be, if we go to 32, which was a bad one at the time, it should key up at 27,325. Well, it's not. My mistake. RC channels. There we go. 35. 37. Let's go here to 27. 27, there's no RCs in the way, so that should read 27, 27.5. 27, 27.5. Alright, so we got that out of the way. It doesn't always fall true like I was just showing you there, because there's what they call RC channels in between. And what I mean by that is, let me put something here to separate those two. Oh, and wait a minute, let me turn this back over again. We got a capacitor over here that I'm not happy with, because the way that it's there, it can short out. Let me see if I can show you real quick. See this capacitor right here? Well, it's got these long legs on it. When you put the cover on it, that's going to bend down. When it bends down, those long legs could short out. And if it does, well, then you're going to have a little bit of an issue with shorting and not working. And when I say entry level, that's what happens when you buy entry level. So let me get a little piece of tape or something here. Because we don't want that to short out in the future. And we're going to put it right down on the board like that. And then we can just push that down, and now we don't have to worry about it. Now, if this was a better radio, what I would have done is taken the thing off, put some tubing over each leg, and solder it back on again. This works just as fine. This is good. Okay, so that's where we're at. So now let's turn it over and see if we can get some kind of transmit on this thing. So hold on a minute. All right. Okay, now here we are. Now, I think I showed you, we're talking about, what do we got here? I don't know if you can see it with glare or not. We're on 27, and we're talking actually about a half a watt. So that's not even giving me an SWR adjustment at that point. So we're going to get into this and try to get it up a little bit higher than that. We're talking about the radios, guys. So again, one may be modulation, the audio output. So one of them could make a difference. If you decided you were going to play with these things, you want to make sure that you pay attention. First, I would suggest you don't. But there's a little nipple on it, and you want to check it. Now, these aren't pots to where they just keep turning, so you have to count turns. All right, it's going to go one way so far and the other way so far. So if you have your screwdriver in there and you know that's where it's at, if you turn it all the way one way and all the way the next, you know at that point that's where it was when I started, so that's where I want it to be now. Okay? You know, so basically it would, you really shouldn't, but if you do, pay attention to where that little nipple is and how your screwdriver is in there, so you can have a way of putting it back to where you found it. Now, some of the radios are going to have this little brown plastic type can. It's a trimmer pot. I think you're with me here. And there's a little black piece in there that takes a little screwdriver, and it's either going to have wax on it, so you may not see it, beeswax, or it's going to have an elastic band, like a piece of rubber band stuck in it. And that is to help keep this thing from moving, the wax or the rubber band. If it's wax, you gotta have to kind of get in there and play with it a little bit, heat it up with a solder iron or something to get in there, or the rubber band, whatever. But this has a little bit to do with your power. But you just can't turn it up, because the more you just start cranking things up, the more you're going to disturb your modulation. Modulation meaning your output audio. You follow me so far? So to have 10 watts But if nobody can hear you, what good is the 10 watts? I'd rather have 2 watts and have them turn the radio down because I'm too loud than to have 10 watts and they can't hear me because there's no audio. And again, the radio is only capable of doing so much, so it has to be kind of balanced out to a happy medium. The companies don't sit there and fine-tune each radio. The radio output is the law, for those of you who go by that. With CB, it's kind of like, go do what you want to do, as long as you don't disturb anybody. That's the way it is now. But the law is 4 watts. So the companies have to abide by the law when they build these things. 4 watts of output power. No more than 4 watts of output power. The key to mic, 4 watts. The receive, what you're hearing, could be 4 or 5 watts. Usually they're around 5 watts. That 5 watts is just what you're hearing, how loud it's going to get. It's like an amplifier in your car, your stereo. You know, you got a 100-watt amplifier, so you can hear better. Doesn't help you talk any better, helps you hear. Well, that's what that 5 watts is. There's really not much on that. There's, you know, they don't care too much about that. It's the output power, no, not to exceed 4 watts, and your output audio, which is your modulation output. What people are hearing, that's not to exceed 100% of audio. So what the companies do, they throw all the little parts in there that kind of take it and put it below the requirements that FCC puts out. So your radio may come out with 3 watts of power. Because again, they're not going to sit there and fine tune each one. Now, is there a difference between 3 watts and 4 watts? Not at all. Is there a difference between 2 watts and 4 watts? Not really. All right, unless you're driving something else. But meanwhile, if I'm talking to you with 2 watts with good audio versus 4 watts with good audio, if in fact I had good audio on both, you're really not going to see the difference. You know, if 2 watts is not a big deal, you know. So people will say, oh, peak it up, you know. Well, I can get 5 watts out of it. Oh, yeah, because we only have 4 watts. That 1 watt means diddly crap. The only thing that 1 watt is going to do is destroy your modulation, your audio output to other people, because it's going to bring it down. So what you want is, you want to have some decent forward audio and your wattage wherever it happens to fall. And then you kind of play with it to get your happy medium from there. Now there's a thing in the radio that the slang word for it is a clipper. Well, what a clipper is either going to be a diode or a transistor. I'm looking for my clippers, hold on. All right, and how it got the term clipper, that's slang, is because if you find the right diode or the right transistor and you clip it, that will take that audio output, your modulation, and make it louder. Because what the companies do is they put these so-called clippers in, and it takes your audio output, your modulation, and anything over a certain amount, it bleeds it off to ground so that you can only get so loud. So the radio is never going to do 100% audio. You put a power mic on it, and all it's going to do is maybe make it a little bit louder, but you're not going to be able to crank it up or get any more out of it because it's just going to feedback. You're going to start getting feedback. So you're going to have to start turning down things like your modulation on the mic gain or the mic gain on the radio so that you don't get the feedback. So you have to get the clipper out of the radio if you want to get good audio using a stock mic or a power mic. Again, the companies give you enough to where it works, but they're not going to fine tune it to the peak that the radio can do because it's not price efficient for them. Right. So when you say clipping the radio, you're taking a pair of clippers, and all they're doing is they're taking the diode or the transistor and they're clipping it. Now, for instance, when I look at this radio, I can see that somebody's been in this radio. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it or not, but I'll try to keep you in here. Can you guys see that? Can you see where I'm at right here? No. Okay, hold on. Okay. You might be able to see it now. You guys see that? Yeah. That's a diode. Now I can see that somebody resoldered that diode, and they resoldered this diode. And what they were doing was they didn't know which one to take, so they're just starting to cut them all. They cut this, separated the two ends to see if it made a difference. If it didn't, they'd put the two ends back together and they'd solder it. Same thing with this one. They cut it. If it makes a difference, fine. If it doesn't, they solder it back together. Right? And then that's where they started going with this. So they start clipping what they're thinking is the clipper, right, which is stopping the audio from going on. Sometimes it's just a three-legged transistor, one of these things. And if that's the case, you kind of find the third leg, the leg that's going off the ground, and you clip it. Or turn the board over and unsolder it. But most of the time they just clip it. If they can bend the transistor over enough, like I just did there, and they can get in there with a fine clipper, they'll clip whatever leg it is going off the ground, and they clip the radio. Right? So that's how I got the word clipping, or tuning peak. You're bringing the radio up to its peak. You're tuning it to the peak. Right? Or the PEP, peak envelope power, for sideband in this case. And that's kind of how that works. But you don't want to just start cutting things, because you're gonna have to solder it back, and you could end up not soldering it back, or the other piece that you cut ends up falling through the board. Now you got to order the piece, and if you don't know what piece to order, because they're all different, that's how that works. Now some of them are put in one way and some are put in another way. For instance, this one over here is basically the same thing as this one here, but they're just soldered in, they're installed differently. The one that's back here, if this is the board, can you see that? I don't know if you see that or not. I'm looking through the magnifying glass here. Okay, let's just do it this way. If this is the board, the diode is coming up. You have your diode, and then it comes down and goes back in again. Right? And what you're doing is you're soldering it here and here to the board. Now the diode is going to have a mark on one side, and that indicates which way the voltage is traveling. The diode is like a one-way street. It only allows voltage to go in one direction. Right? Now that's one way of it. They install it. They bend it up. If they haven't got room and the boards or the design of the board makes it so that they have to do that, that's what they'll do. You'll see a lot of resistors that way too. And then in some cases, like the other one, that's the board, and then you'll just see it in here, and they'll just solder it in this way, which is like this one. But they're still diodes. These other things with all the different color stripes on them, those are resistors. And you'll see those mounted both ways as well. So, and as a rule, the board will kind of tell you what things are anyway. I mean, it doesn't tell you what it does, but it'll tell you, if it's an R5, if it's a D12, if it's a D52, or whatever the case may be. If it's a transistor, it might say TR, with a number. So it kind of gives you an indication. And then there are also the boards marked, like that circle with the little positive mark over here. All right, that would tell me that's a capacitor, because this board is probably used for different radios. All right, so one radio may have a capacitor in there, so that tells me that's for a capacitor. Right? The R tells me that those are resistors. The J is a jumper. The D is a diode. Right? And again, usually a T or a TR. Yeah, there it is, TR. That's TR37, transistor. An R is just a resistor. So that's kind of how they mark the board. And here's a D4. But meanwhile, the guy that tried to clip this, or the person who tried to clip it, I can only assume that it was a guy, because women don't usually get inside radios and start clipping them. A woman that's in ham radio may decide to work on it, but other than that, an average woman or CBer would not want to do this unless it's a guy as a rule, because they can't keep their hands out of things. And we all think we can fix anything, so leave it up to the guys to blow shit up. So this radio has been worked on. I can tell just by the other side because of all the cold solder joints as well. Because we had a bunch of cold solder joints, we had a bunch of solder that was piled up like a volcano because they didn't clean out the solder before they put in the solder. You know, it was just one thing after another of mistakes. But we have it receiving and we have it working on all the 40 channels right now. Because if you remember right, everything that was between 2 and 7 wasn't working. So 2 through 7, 12 through 17, 22 through 27, 32 through 37 did not work. As well as none of it worked with the cold solder joint. So we got the cold solder joint fixed, and then we found the other thing and fixed that. Now this would have been a lot easier if I had the right equipment hanging around to do it with, but meanwhile we get it done. Now I want to bring this up a little bit. I'm not going to worry about the so-called clipper right now. I just want to try to get it so that I have a little bit of power, so that I can at least check the SWRs, which I know are good, but I want to check them anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into that little pot that had the wax in it that I was talking about earlier, and I'm going to kind of turn that back and forth if I can get a screwdriver to fit in there. Because I don't want to crack that either, because that will break. And sometimes if you're lucky, okay, so that's not doing much. You don't see much movement there in the needle. See it going down? You guys see that? There's my finger in the way. All right, and if I bring it up to its peak, it'll start going up and it'll start going down again. Okay, so we wanted to keep it at its peak for now. Hello, hello. Now we have good forward audio at that point, but we only have a half a watt of power. So there is a difference between a half a watt, right? You know, and 2 and 3 watts. So now, if you were running, for instance, a 100-watt amplifier, you may want that half a watt, because that's going to give you on a 100-watt amplifier that you would normally only see about 30 or, well, about 70%. So you may see about 60 to 70 watts coming out of it on 11 meters. But with that being at a half a watt, you may only get 40 watts out of that of power, which now that could make a difference. Between 40 and 70, there's a big difference. But the audio is going to be like boom. You follow me? Because again, hello, you know, so we would probably be keying up at, well, hypothetically speaking, 40 watts, but when we talk, it's going to be swinging to 70 watts. All right, you know, and wow, you know, shit, turn the radio down, you know. So there's a lot of different ways of getting into tuning and doing things with radios. Now, oh, here's the screwdriver I was looking for. Now there's another one, because this is a sidebander, there's another one right here, down in there. You see that little pot right down there, that right there? That's also got a little bit to do with power on this thing. So we're going to play with that for a minute too. Now we don't want to bring the power way up high. I want to, if I can get 2 watts out of this and have that needle go forward when I talk, I'd be happy. Because right now I'm in what they call the average reading, average meter reading. So I'm seeing average audio. If I bring it up too high, the audio will start swinging backwards. When it swings backward, you're going to sound like shit. All right. And again, 2 watts to 4 watts make no difference to me. Whoa, there you go. See, I can bring this right up. Look at there. I can bring it up to 10 watts. But I don't want that. Hello. Because I want the needle to move forward. Audio 1 2 1 2 1 2. That's what I want. Now, I have it up high enough to where I can actually check SWRs now. So let's see what the SWRs are. Now, you're checking SWRs. The other thing is you don't want to sit there with the mic keyed and play with this thing, trying to get it right on the money. Because the longer that mic is keyed, if you have a high SWR, you're not going to know it until you adjust it. And then you may blow the radio just in checking your SWRs. So you want to key the mic. Make sure the mic gain's turned down. Key the mic. Bring it up there. Get it up as quick as you can. Now, if I don't get it up all the way, guys, we're talking about the meter. Let's just say I got it to there and I stop for now. All right, that'll give me a rough indication as to if I'm okay or not. All right, now that's telling me right now over here, because I've got 3 jumpers in line, that I'm a little on the high side. I'm almost a 2 on the SWRs. That's a little high. I wouldn't want that there. That antenna, when I'm over there, the antenna usually gives me about a 1.3, 1.4. That's that solar comm. But because I got jumpers in line and I got the meter in line, which the meter doesn't interfere with it too much, and the barrel connectors in line, that's why I have a little bit high on the SWR. So now that I know I'm within the safe limit, now I can take it and at least key it up and get a little bit better where I want to just rest on the end. And then push that in. There you go. There's a nice SWR. See it? 1.2, 1.3. That's what we're looking for. Now, also, when you're checking SWRs, make sure that the needle, the gauge, is all the way off, back. Because you don't want to key this up. Let me show you what I mean. Come on. There you go. I want to be able to tune this up using the knob, so I can control it and bring it up slowly. I don't want to have it so high up that when I key it, it bangs like that, because eventually that's going to kill your meter. It's going to either knock off the accuracy or you're just going to blow up the meter. So at that point, you don't want to do that. You want to keep it down, key it, and gradually bring it up, get it close, and stop. You don't have to be on the money. It's like when you're shooting at a target. You're shooting to stop. You don't have time to get there and aim for his button. You follow me? You want to aim for the center of the mass. So we want to get this as close to the end as possible, just to get it checked, and then stop, check it. And then we can always, if it's good, then we can kind of tweak it to where we want. Now again, this doesn't adjust the SWRs. This is just testing them. Whatever this meter shows when I'm on SWR, say for instance it's showing, well, this ain't going to go that high because it's good SWR. I can't get it any higher. But let's just say it's showing that. So in return, I want to bring it down. So I tune this down. Then I can bring it right down to 0. Well, that doesn't mean it's 0. It's still what it was. This is an antenna SWR meter for checking. It's not a SWR tuner, all right, to where you can adjust your SWRs. So whatever it sees, don't think you're making changes, because it's not making changes. It's what it is what it is. Okay, so we know our SWRs are good. Now on power. 5, 5, 5, 5. Now, if I took that little thing over here that I showed you earlier, and I kind of cranked that up a little bit. 5. What's the needle doing? 5, 5. Swinging backwards. I don't want that. Lesser power, in this case, is better. 5, 5. So I can bring it up to where I think I'm right about at the point to where I'm getting a little bit of movement on it, and I'm happy with the power. I got about 3 watts. Hello, 5, 5, 1, 2, 1, 2, and we're moving forward. That's all I need to know. So I'm happy with this radio. This radio is done. You with me so far, guys? Now let's talk about SWRs for a minute. Let me turn this off. Disconnect the power. There we go. SWRs. Why you don't want to talk with a radio with high SWRs? An antenna is basically a solid object out there. And that's a lot stronger than all these little parts in the radio. So it's like what you're doing is the radio is trying to put out X amount of power. So for a number, we'll just say 4 watts. So the radio is trying to put out 4 watts of power. Well, the higher the SWR on the antenna is saying it's not going to happen. It's going to start stopping, and almost like, we're just going to say pushing. We're going to make it easy here. It's like the antenna is saying, screw you. I haven't got a good SWR, so I'm going to push power back into the radio. I'm not going to let the power out that the radio is trying to give me. So in return, the antenna is not going to blow up, but the parts in here are going to start to heat up. So depending upon how high your SWRs are, will depend on how much power is actually making it out of the radio, or how much power is being pushed back into the radio, basically being stopped from going out. And your transistors, your PA, power amplifier, or your final output power, your final is going to end up going poof, because it can blow. The antenna is not going to go anywhere. The only way that antenna is going to blow is if it's rated for 1,000 watts and you put 2,000 watts through it, but that's not going to happen. So that's why SWRs is important to keep them low. Anything more than a 1.5, I'm not really happy with. I don't like 1.1. I like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. That's where I like my SWRs. Everybody's different. 1.5, I'll talk on it. 1.6, I'll talk on it. 1.7, I'll talk on it, but not as long-winded, because we don't want that piece to start heating up too quick. All right? But when it starts getting up past 1.7, I don't want to know nothing. I'm not going to talk on it. All right? I'm going to find out why and make some adjustments with it. So that's kind of how SWRs work. It's like two people, you know, one trying to get in the door, one trying to get out the door. Well, the one that's trying to get in the door, we'll say, is a little guy, all right, that 100 pounds. The one standing at the door saying you're not getting in is a big 400-pound, you know, weightlifter. And this little guy keeps pushing against them. You know, and it's only a matter of time when this little guy's going to just say, oh, man, and he's going to fall to the ground. He's going to get exhausted. Well, that's what happens, all right? That big guy is the antenna. The little guy is this little piece in here saying, I can't do it anymore. Bam, he's out like a light. So, all right, I'm going to screw this back together. You don't need to see me do that. I'm going to also see if there's a way if I can finagle this meter, this speaker into the radio. And I think I might be able to do that. It's a strong possibility. Actually, I know I can do that. Okay, and because the meter that was in this radio, the speaker that was in this radio was bad. So that's another thing you want to check. First thing you check if your radio doesn't key up or you don't hear anything is your microphone, because the microphone can have a lot to do with that. Also, you want to pull the cord when you're checking it. Man, stretch the cord a little bit. You want to shake it around the end when you're checking it, stuff like that, because this is just a lever. The switch is the switch. The switch is actually inside. All right, so it could be a bad switch. It could be dirty. It could be a lot of things. It could be the cartridge in the microphone. Sometimes it's cheaper just to buy another mic, though. But you know, if you know how to change it, you can take that out. You look at the number on it. You get on the internet. You find the cartridge. You put it back in yourself. It's done. All right, and things like that. But the microphone's the first thing you check. Speaker, if you have an external speaker, in that case I didn't, but I had this one. You just plug it in the external speaker jack. If it works, you're not hearing anything on the radio, but you hear it when you put the speaker in. Hello, either you got the speaker on PA or the speaker in the radio blue, one or the other. So, you know, but that's kind of how that works. I'll be back. All right, so there it is. That's where I'm going to leave it for now. It's just stuck up there with a screw holding it. It'll probably get bolted up underneath here someplace because I really don't want all this crap up here. That's the Echo Mod box that I had made years and years ago. So I hooked that up to it. The mic plugs into it and it plugs into that, and then away we go. So that's working. Lots of noise. That's a start. So now I'm going to start working on this antenna. This is the antenna that I wanted to try. Hold on a minute while I get these legs out of here. Yeah, am I getting you dizzy yet, guys? Dizzy. Hey, you Dizzy. You Dizzy's got himself a little friend. It's called a duck, I think. Or a swan. It doesn't look like a swan. It looks more like a duck. And the poor little fella stayed and didn't fly south with all his little buddies because he likes his little You Dizzy. He's a faithful little bugger. So You Dizzy adopted him, and good for You Dizzy. He's feeding him, keeping him fed, keeping him warm, keeping him watered. So, meanwhile, let's talk about this antenna for a minute. Let me turn down the marine net. I was looking for an antenna to use for the house to work on the SDR Play radio. As I was scanning through antennas on the internet, and I was also making one, which I have, it's outside. I found a couple of theirs. I found a base, and they're mobile. Now there's a lot of story in between, but I'm gonna bury all that pain. So I contacted them with a little demo button they have, and I contacted them and told them, you know, a little bit about what I'm doing and so on, and that I'd be interested in trying them, one or the other or both. You know, because I can't find any reviews on this, which I Couldn't. I haven't looked the last couple of days, but I couldn't find any reviews on this anywhere. Now this by no means is a review. I'm just telling you what I think about it. If you want to call it a review, fine. But I'm not staging it. I'm not setting it up. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I'm gonna tell it like it is. Now I had already had this antenna together and had tested it, but the video was so damn long, because you know how I get when I start to talk, that I just couldn't do that to you guys. So I'm going to do it again. Now the first thing that I found that I didn't like right off the bat. Now with some of your higher end antennas, they do, this is the way they come. Not so much in pieces, but you get all your little Allen screws, you get the Allen wrench, you get your little weatherproof gasket, you get your mount, and you get your elements. And on some of your higher end, so-called higher end antennas, you may not get a mount to actually mount it to the car on. You're getting just the mount to mount to whatever mount you're going to put it on the car. Now, in all fairness to them, there's a lot of different mounts out there. So how do they know which one, you know, you're going to want to need? And they're not going to want to stock all these little antennas with all these mounts in them. So they sell it without the mount, which is okay. However, when they start to sell these, the first one I'm going to put in is going to be a 17 3/4 length, according to the sheet that I'm looking at right here. So it's simple to put together. I'm just going to measure it out, make sure we got close to 7, there we go, 17 3/4. And I'm going to set this in a location so that it kind of fits the same. So that means that this is going to go right there. So meanwhile, for the price of this antenna, because that I don't care for. For the price of this antenna, they could have at least thrown in a basic surface mount antenna with 15 feet of coax and a PL259 connector. Now why I say that is because with a surface mount, most of us out there who are involved with any type of radio can adapt that to do just about whatever we need it to do. If we want to make a mount to hook it on a trunk lip, on a cowl mount, you know, we have a start. 15 feet of coax would more than likely get us through any of the installations we need to do, unless we're running a real long super van or something. But other than that, that'll be it. So we can adapt that. Also, if it comes with a PL259 connector, there's a lot of adapters for that as well. And most of your radios already are PL259 connectors. Now they claim that this will transmit and receive. They're saying that it's going to receive from 25 megahertz to 6 gigahertz. That is a lot. That really is. Now, personally, I probably won't see me going any higher than 2, possibly 3. But it will go to 6 as far as receiving. 25 megahertz to 6 gigahertz on receive. On transmit, they're saying 88 megahertz to 6 gigahertz. And that's also like, wow, if this is the case, I mean, this is the antenna. I mean, why go with anything else? So because of all that, you know, it sounds like the cat's meow. Now I have all the radios hooked up in the order in which they're telling me to hook them up. And I have this set the same way as this diagram. You can tell that I've already done it before because I even highlighted the straight ones. Now they're also saying on the bent elements, you measure it from the bend to the tip. So in this case, I want to run the longest one. So let's go with the 12 3/4. So I'm going to run it, because we can just put them side by side, but I want to make sure that we have 12 3/4. So you measure from the bend. If you want to make sure you're close, take it from the inside of the bend. So that's 12 3/4. Now the 12 3/4, they tell me it goes up here. Now what they did nice about this, because it is a bent element, they flattened it out here so that the Allen key catches it, which will help it and prevent it from doing this in the wind. So we're going to stick that one in there. So meanwhile, like I'm saying, for the money that they're charging for the antenna, alright, even though it's so-called a specialty antenna, they could throw in a surface mount 15 feet of coax with a PL259 connector. So that's one of the things I don't like. Alright, now we're going to go to the 11. This is the 11. Again, I'll measure it. Hey, Tuck. I'll measure it from the inside of the bend to the end, and we have our 11. And we're going to stick this over here. Want to make sure it goes in all the way. We want to bottom it out, because we want to make sure that we get a good bite on everything. And we're going to tighten it up. Now, what's the price of the antenna? Well, if you go to a place that I had found one of them on, actually I found them both once I got there. It's called the Antenna Farm. I'm not pushing them or anything, but that's where I happen to have found it. They're asking $89 for the antenna. Now I'm down to the last element, which is going to be 8 3/4. So let's just double check, make sure we have 8 3/4, which we do. And again, they're all flat on the bent side, so you know that they're not going to spin around on you in the wind. Because, believe it or not, the elements are critical. If this is supposed to do what it's supposed to do, these elements are going to be a critical part, a critical element of the antenna. They tell you right in the directions, do not change the lengths. Don't add, don't cut, do nothing. Just install it as you see it. And as you can see, it's easy to install. Yeah, if you can get the Allen wrench into the Allen screw, there you go. Alright, so that is the antenna. Now I'm going to have to find something to put here just to kind of hold it upright. So hold on a minute here, guys. Don't need much. Just need something more than what I can get my hands on. Come on, come on, come on, come on. So this should work. There we go. Alright. So that's what we have. And what we have left is the Allen wrench or key and Allen screw, and we still have the weather gasket, which goes on when you screw this on to what they call an an NMO. November, Michael, October. That's what they call that mount that's on here. So if you wanted to buy a mount for it to go on your vehicle, you know, be it a cowl mount, surface mount, trunk mount, lip mount, gutter mount, whatever it may be, you would have to buy the NMO mount. Alright, so that's what we have. So I don't know if you can see the antenna or not, but let's try to get you a little bit of an eye on what it kind of looks like. I know with all the crap I got around in the background and things, it's a little tough to see. Maybe I'll go this way. Hey guys, yeah, there's the shop for you. But that's kind of it. You know what? It may show better over here. And again, I'm not looking to do anything special. I'm just giving you guys an idea what I have here, so you got an idea what the hell I'm talking about. Okay, so that's it. It stands up maybe 17 inches or so. You know, it's not a big antenna. It's not tall. It's not, you know, gaudy. It's not going to hit all kinds of crap in the trees and things unless you put it on top of a very high vehicle. But that's the antenna. Now, I don't like the price because they could put a mount in it. Being in the business at one time, I know what some of this stuff costs. And I don't want to hear about research and development because I know about that too. because I used to be in research and development with Marlin's Firearms and Winchester's when they were based in New Haven. Winchester's was on Winchester Avenue and Marlin's was on Willow Street. And I worked for both of them in their research and development. So, I know all about research and development as well. To put a surface mount with this, so that when you receive the package, now they do tell you in the list when you're buying it that the mount is not included. So in all fairness to them, they're letting you know. However, for the amount of that, what it's going to cost them, let's get right down to brass tacks. What it's going to cost them to put that mount in there is almost zip. And I mean almost zip. We're talking $2-3. We're not talking a lot of money here. Right? They're talking a $90 antenna. Now, what are we getting for $99? For $90, $89.95, $89.99. What are we getting? Again, put the research and development aside. Put all the manufacturing and all the machinery, because they've already got all that going. They've had that started beforehand. Put all that aside, and their taxes and their insurances and their medical, and put all that aside, because if they're that big, they should be making more of these, and if not, they're putting themselves out of business. So either downsize or start selling them. And if you're not selling them, you're not selling them because you're trying to get too much out of them. My opinion. I was in business. I owned a store. I know. And I did very well with my store. We're getting 5-6 pieces of stainless steel. Anyway, I'm thinking it's stainless. It looks like stainless. All right, and it probably is, because they're not going to want the rust on you. So it's probably stainless steel. Okay? We took a couple pieces. We put a bend in it. Again, research, development, time, figuring it out. But you guys see me put antennas to here together. It takes me a minute to figure it out, measure it out, cut the rod, do what I got to do. All right? Again, if they're putting a lot of money into making this, they shouldn't be making them. Now what do we have? We have a piece of aluminum down here. Looks like a little spaceship. Then we have this. This is another thing I don't like. These little plastic pieces, I'm going to unscrew it. It also has a thread on it because it screws into this little spaceship circular piece here that holds the elements. Again, which is just a piece of turned aluminum. Anybody that does this kind of stuff, you know what it'll take to turn that. You know, and if you're running a production line, you know, once you get it set, it's set. Again, I understand the cost of the machinery and all that kind of crap. This is made of plastic. They've got the brass collar in here with the threads, so it'll get a good bite on the other side, you know, the vehicle mount, when you screw it down. The center is spring-loaded, which is right, because that'll connect to the center part. And then this screws into this, and this is basically the antenna from here up. The problem with these is, after a year and a half maybe, especially in the elements where the seasons change drastically, like up here in Connecticut, and even with them in Ohio, do you think they would know these things? These have a tendency of cracking. Now when this cracks, if you can see in the center, that's all plastic. The only thing that's brass is the thread and the center conductor in the middle. The plastic is everything else that's holding all that together. Well, that center conductor screws into the main antenna. Your $90 antenna. Well, when this cracks, and it will, and you're driving down the road and you hear clunk, 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 clunk going across the roof of your vehicle, you just lost a $90 antenna. This should be made out of a cast, a metal of some sort, or even stainless. And it can be, because I have some. I have antennas out there right now that have aluminum or a cast, and I also have some plastic, and the ones I have are cracked. I'll take you out there and show you in a minute. So this could have been better. This is just going to cost you more money because you're going to lose your antenna. You're going to lose it. No doubt about it. After a while, this is going to go poof. Two things I don't like about the antenna. I don't like the price. Doesn't come with the mount, which they could throw that in there, but they're going to make $2 less. All right? But they'll probably sell a lot more. I don't like this. Again, for what they're making on this antenna, they can give you a better mount. In my opinion. This is all my opinion. I don't like this. Now, putting all that aside, let's know if it's going to work or not. Well, remember I told you I took it outside. And I tried it two ways. I tried it one by putting this on the NMO mount in my truck, which is up there on the front fender, sticking right out there. There's an antenna on it now. It's a straight 2-meter 440. It's about 20 inches tall. And it's a plastic mount on that one. That's the one that's broke. And it's only holding a little piece of stainless about the length of this 17-inch. It's probably, like I say, it's probably 19 and a quarter or so. And it's cracked in 3 places. So that mount that's out there now, eventually it's going to go poof. I unscrewed that antenna. I put this antenna on. Then I couldn't test it too high. I couldn't go way up to where they say this goes, because my Rig Expert antenna analyzer only goes up to 230. So I took my Rig Expert out and I hooked this up, because I wasn't going to plug this into a radio, because I want to see if it's going to transmit like they said it's going to do. Because if it did, I'd be able to use it on my 2-meter, my 440. I'd be able to use it on my 1200. There's 3 or 4 radios that I could have used this on if it was going to transmit up there. Now there's no adjustments on this thing for SWRs. The only adjustment I might be able to make is by maybe changing the length of the coax, because sometimes that'll work. But right here it tells you the element lengths are critical. Do not change any of the element lengths. Right here, black and white. All right, here's the directions of putting it together. It's simple to put together. All right. There's 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. I hooked it up to the truck. I put the analyzer on it. Oh, you can't see the analyzer. I'm sorry, guys. Analyzer. It's the Rig Expert 230. Whoa, come here. Runaway antenna. The lowest SWR that I've seen on transmit. Now I can't go any higher than 230, so I gotta give them this. I can only test from there down. The lowest SWR I've seen with the antenna mount that's on my truck, that I have an antenna on now, which is a 1/4 wave, and the SWRs on the antenna that I have on the truck using the same mount that I used on this is a 1.4, and the high side is a 1.6. This is coming up 2.7 and higher. That's high. All right? 2.7 to me, it's not. I'm not going to use it. So how are we getting from 88 megahertz to 6 gigahertz if I can't get above 230 without going up to 4.3? Actually, it went from 2.7 to 4.3 within the spectrum of this meter, this analyzer. That analyzer. So as far as transmit, I wouldn't trust it. Now let's talk about receive for a minute. We're talking over $100 by the time you buy the mount for an antenna to hook up to what? Your shortwave radio, your scanner, you know, whatever. Because I'm not going to use it to transmit on. Now again, it may be the cat's meow once it starts getting up into the, you know, 5, 6, up to 6 gigahertz. I mean, it may be. But why are you claiming it's going to do it down at 88? 88 to 6 when I can't get it below 2.7, and that's the lowest. Because that's not a safe SWR. I don't care what you tell me. Right? It's going to start to interfere with your radio and the transmission. And the antenna that's there now has a good SWR using the same mount, same coax. And it doesn't say anywhere that you have to have a special length and use a special mount. Okay? So far I have nothing good to say about this antenna. I tried receive. I took it off the truck. I made a bracket for it because I have a mount with a thread on it, the same as that's on here. So I was able to on-thread this, go through the metal with an insulator because I don't want it to short, with an insulator, which is not going to short anyway, with an insulator, and I put it up on the tower. Well, at first I put it up about my reach, so it was a little over. Well, a little over 6 feet. I'll say 6 feet. And I ran the coax in through the door, double shielded. I tried it with 75 ohm on receive now, and 50 ohm. I put 2 different frequencies in.